Hi, I'm Jane Hillsdon, marketing consultant and founder of Dragonfly Marketing. Welcome to this episode of the How to Do Marketing Show, a no-nonsense podcast about marketing for small business. It's our mission at Dragonfly Marketing to put marketing on the agenda for every regionally based small business in Australia. Why? Because we know that when marketing is done properly, it can help your business grow. We believe small businesses are the backbone of our nation. When your business grows, it benefits not only you and your family, it benefits your whole community. Small businesses create a vibrant and connected economy. We employ local people, we donate to local charities, and we work together to build resilient and thriving regional communities. The How to Do Marketing Show is a podcast just for you and your small business. Bursting with marketing insight and information, this show will be a fabulous resource to help you know all there is to know about the topic of marketing for small business. And in this episode, we are taking a dive into the topic of influencer marketing with Neal Schaffer. Neal is a leading authority on helping businesses in digital marketing, including social media marketing strategy, influencer marketing, and social selling initiatives. He's also the author of 4 books, and the latest book is actually dedicated solely to the topic of influencer marketing. It's called The Age of Influence. Now, if you're like me, you may have some preconceived ideas as to what influencer marketing is all about. Girls with tens of thousands of followers on Instagram who wear bikinis and then charge money for selling fashion and beauty or lifestyle products, right? And you would be right. That is definitely one form of influencer. However, as Neal points out in this interview, influencer marketing has a much broader and a more powerful scope than this. It is not limited to beautiful people selling fashion and lifestyle products on Instagram. It actually can be used by business-to-business businesses and for small businesses. There are actually many influencers that we might be able to tap into, and guys, they're sitting right under our noses. So let's get stuck in. So welcome to the How to Do Marketing Show, Neal. I'm so glad you could join us all the way from LA.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Jane. I'm honored to be here.
Now, Neal, I'm going to kick off with asking a question kind of to try and understand the term influencer, because I feel like for me and probably a lot of our listeners that the term influencer has a certain connotation or a perception that's kind of wrapped around it. I know for me, when I think of influencer, I think of, say, Instagram creators. So they build a massive big tribe based on, either their beauty or their popularity or their celebrity status. And then they kind of partner with brands and they use their platform and content integration to help the brand that they've partnered with to become more visible to their followers. Or even they use this platform to convince their followers to buy from that brand. That's how I kind of perceive influencers. I'm betting you have a more comprehensive definition of what being an influencer is all about.
No, Jane, what you talked about is exactly the way that the media, the blogosphere, and the influencer marketing industry talks about itself. Precisely. And it's funny because I've been on a few Australian podcasts recently, and I don't think there's anywhere else in the world where when we talk about the word influencer marketing, they sort of literally, they tell me they cringe, right? And until they hear me explain it, it's something, and a lot of, especially small businesses are thinking, I don't have a budget to work with celebrities. And I'm here to tell you that influencer marketing is a lot more than just that. And I do believe that marketers have almost been misled as to what influencer marketing really is. You see, before Instagram, we had something we don't talk a lot about called mommy bloggers.
Yeah.
Right? And mommy bloggers, it was all about something we call blogger outreach, right?
Yes.
Same concept, right? We're reaching out to content creators because of their digital influence. It's not Instagram, it's a blog. And in fact, maybe Jane, someone has reached out to you saying, I'd love to get a link from your blog. They don't usually say it in that way, but they want to somehow get a link back to their blog from your blog, guest blog or trade links. And that's another sign that you have influence and that someone wants to tap into your digital influence. Because if you send a signal to Google that says, I'm linking to your blog, that is also part influencer marketing. In fact, we can go back to affiliate marketing, right? And I know that not every business listening is a B2C business, which is great because it works the same in the B2B world. I think that when B2B companies have events, they try to tap into industry influencers, they try to interview them on their blog, they try to do a roundup post, or if they have a podcast, they try to interview them. So really, the general definition, I like to keep it rather broad, are digital content creators that have built a community. So digital content creation is in one of four forms. What we're doing right now is audio, right? Podcast. And for any given industry, Jane, for any given industry, there are podcasters who have a community of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of listeners, right? Who you can tap into as a business. We have video, which obviously we speak of YouTube. We have photography, which Instagram is perfect. And we have text, which is normally blog. But obviously, when we talk about photo and video, it can really be any social network. But the heart of the matter is an influencer is a content creator, digitally speaking, and they have a community. And this is where it gets really interesting because the influencer marketing industry used to push all these celebrities. And when I see someone on TV, they're no longer an influencer, they're a celebrity, right? So we're talking about people that have yet to appear on TV. But a few years ago, they defined this term called micro-influencer. And a micro-influencer is someone with a mere 10,000 followers, which is still a lot of followers, right?
Yeah.
And they're looking at Instagram, first of all. But recently, over the last year or two, they have been looking at nano influencers. A nano influencer is someone that only has 1,000 followers. And they're finding that, first of all, they're more reasonable to work with from a business perspective. Second of all, they're finding that, the further down they go, the more authentic these people are, the more engaging their community is. And guess what? Maybe there's a higher chance that they've actually used our product before or have heard of our brand before, right? So, and there's less of a chance that they bought fake followers or they have fake engagement, which still is very rampant on Instagram. So when I was writing, I wrote a book called The Age of Influence recently about all of this. And I realized at 1,000 followers, look around of all the people that that might have 1,000 followers on any given social network. Look at your employees, look at your partners, look at your customers, look at your followers on social media. You'd be surprised, but there's a lot of people out there that you might be able to collaborate with. So when I define influencer, I define that. And in fact, Jane, I actually stick with people that the brand, or I should say people that have like, know, and trust, have brand affinity for the company. Start with employees, start with customers, start with fans, because they're going to be easier to work with. And they're already fans. You don't need to sell them on your brand, on your business. It's when you reach outside of that to someone that's never heard of you that you start to run into a lot of different issues. But that's really the heart of it. And, it's funny, I do business in Japan very frequently, and they're very far behind on digital and social media marketing. But when I talk about influencer marketing, they get it because they know that what builds business is word of mouth marketing. And originally, social media was supposed to be word of mouth marketing, but it just doesn't work that way because it's pay to play. But really, when you collaborate with the right people, you can incite that word of mouth. And if no one is talking about your business in social media, you need to get people to talk about it. So and I see it in China as well, companies just don't do much organic social media. They just do influencers, or they just leverage influencer content as their own content on their social media channels, or they leverage user-generated content. So once you get over the cringy name because of the way that, the industry and the blogs have talked about it, and you understand you're just tapping into this concept of digital influence that has been around since celebrity endorsements. These are the new celebrity endorsements, right?
Yes.
Our kids, they watch people on YouTube, on Instagram, TikTok, people we've never heard of, but they influence them as much as movie stars and TV stars influenced us when we were young, right? So it's really the same concept, but because of the democratization of media and attention and influence, there's just a lot more people out there that we can tap into for this purpose. So once you buy into that definition, then hopefully you begin to see the potential. We can talk more about that obviously during this episode.
Yeah, and I love that, and you really have kind of broadened my thinking in terms of the definition of an influencer, and it's also made me think about a term that I use quite often with clients, called center of influence. So we actually talk about a person's center of influence. So say, for example, a financial planning client, for example, if we look at their clients and we say, well, who else influences your clients when it comes to thinking about financial matters? Who else is in your client's life that might influence certain decisions that they might make? And say for financial planners, that might be their accountant. It could actually be, business colleagues that they catch up with at networking events. And we kind of define exactly who their center of influences are to understand really if there's any kind of opportunities for us to kind of link with those center of influences or get in front of those center of influences to get them recommending, the financial planner to the organization, because we know how much word of mouth and we know how much a trusted referral and how powerful that is. So when you've described influencer, I've immediately thought of, yes, there's like particularly your employees and the stakeholders for your business, your existing customers. These are all potential pockets of not only center of influencers, but influencers. And I think the idea of those nano influencers makes the terminology, or makes the idea of influence marketing a hell of a lot more attractive to small business, and it's not just because obviously they'll charge less, so there'll be that kind of less of a barrier to entry. But I think when you talk about the authenticity of a nano influencer, and I agree with you in terms of some of the influencers, probably the pictorial influencers, as you spoke about on Instagram. That's their business, and as you said, you don't know how they actually went and got those 50,000, 100,000 followers. And something that we always look at is, okay, they might have 100,000 followers, but exactly how much engagement are they actually getting with their community? I would imagine a nano community with really high engagement rates is beyond valuable compared to some of these massive behemoth influencers with 100,000, depending, I guess, on who it is.
Right. I have the exact same experience because I do social selling training as well. Before social media, my background's actually B2B sales, right? And I've written 2 books on LinkedIn. So I work with insurance sales professionals. Right. And the first time I went to the meeting, they were talking about centers of influence. I'm like, are you all doing influence? But so the concept is that I work with a real estate company. They call it spheres of influence, right? It's the same concept. And, by all means, we should all be doing that. But digitally, who are the potential centers of influence? Who are the potential spheres of influence that are out there that we may have not uncovered, because offline, we don't see them or hear about them, but online we can develop relationships, right? We can find some people in neighboring cities, neighboring counties that maybe we don't encounter locally. So yes, it's the exact same concept. And, the interesting thing about the second point you brought up about those Instagram influencers, I was the same way as I was doing research, right? I understand if you have 50,000 Instagram followers, but you have a YouTube link in your bio and you have 5 million YouTube subscribers. Okay, your YouTube subscribers have come over to Instagram, right? But when I see people that have 100,000 followers, yet they have no link, right? Where did you build that influence? And now there are some that successfully build it, but it's very few. So I also, I'm not going to say red flags per se, but I really wonder, Jane, because you and I know it is not that easy to grow followers on Instagram. And I know that a few years ago, it might've been easier, but I also know there was a lot of people that used a lot of technology to help them do that. And if they did that, how real are the followers and how much influence they have. And the industry itself used to just go after impressions. And then they're like, oh, we're wasting our money on followers. We need to go for engagement. And then you have things called Instagram pods, where Instagrammers, they get engagement from each other. So it's always been incentivized, right? If there's money to be gained from having a lot of followers, people will find shortcuts. But the real one is when you ask for link clicks, right? swipe ups or link in bio, when companies actually want to deliver sales, that's where it gets really, really interesting. And can these influencers deliver? And that some actually do, but I don't think all of them do because of those very reasons.
Yes, and I love that. I love that deferral to the link clicks because, again, if you are a seasoned Instagrammer and you've built your Instagram profile from scratch, you know that it is quite hard to actually, if you're actually looking at your insights weekly or monthly, the profile visits or the link clicks are always the lowest in terms of the analytics. It's the unfriendliest of the insights, and it's hard because it's quite clunky, particularly in Instagram, because you can't actually put the link in the post itself. So you actually have to kind of put the instruction in the post that says go and check out our link, and then click through there. Or in the stories, it's only if you've got 10,000 followers or more that you can actually include the swipe up or the call to action to go to the link. So it's not easy for people to actually take people to go and click on that link, unlike Facebook or LinkedIn, where you can just put the link in the post and they can just click straight through. So if you're actually gaining enough engagement and you're compelling people enough to actually go to the effort of clicking on your link in Instagram, you're obviously, doing a good job of engaging them.
Yeah. And, I have 15,000 followers and I do swipe ups.
Yeah.
It's not natural. It's not organic. We weren't
Right.
born to swipe up, right?
Yeah.
I know our kids are like swiping the iPads left and right, but that whole swipe up is just, it's just not natural. And therefore I have never seen, and I haven't really heard of a lot of people that get really great results from that for that reason. So,
wow.
But then again, if you have a really niche community and you're collaborating with something that really fits that community and you're using it and you're talking about it and people really, really want it, they will go out of their way. Yeah. They will find that link in bio, what have you. So there have definitely been success stories. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But I don't think it's not as easy as a lot of people may make it. And then you compare. Well, is our customer also on Facebook? Are they also on LinkedIn? Are they also on Twitter? Are they on YouTube? So are they reading blogs? So we don't have to be just Instagram.
In that Instagram, right. Yes,
there's a lot of other networks out there.
Yeah. So then if we talk about the influencer marketing piece, and if we think about that as a tactic in terms of, helping a small business reach some of their objectives, how is influencer marketing? I mean, you've spoken about, getting people to click through from their profile. But how is influencer, I even mix up the words Instagram and influencer. How is influencer marketing really used to be able to achieve objectives with a small business? Can it be used, throughout the whole sales funnel in terms of, creating awareness, creating consideration, and then creating conversion, which is really that kind of link click and getting people to then go off to the brand's website and hopefully purchase something? Is it best for a particular stage in the funnel? Is it best more for creating awareness? How have you seen that kind of really help a business achieve its marketing objectives?
So as I was writing the book, I did a lot of research and realized that of all the case studies I found and the people I interviewed, there were, 16, 17 different ways in which you could leverage influencers for a variety of objectives.
Great.
And if we go through them, I mean, obviously brand awareness is the obvious one, right? And I think what we're finding, especially over the last year, this continues to evolve, obviously, we're seeing that brands aren't just engaging with influencers for content amplification, they're actually engaging with influencers for content creation. And this has happened a lot because when you work at the nano level, there are people that will post just for product. There's no need to actually give them any money. They genuinely want to try your product, or they're genuinely a fan, or they've always wanted to try your product, or what have you. So when you look at it that way, we begin to see that we can get really fantastic content created, because remember, these are content creators. So chances are they're better than us at creating content. And we can now use that content for our organic social media, which will probably perform better, for our advertising as our assets, and even on our website in our shopping cart. And there have been data that shows that this sort of user-generated content performs better on ads, on shopping carts than content that businesses create. Because, businesses are really good about talking about their products. They're not really good about talking about the user or the solution or sort of the lifestyle or that user-centric perspective. And that's what people, bring to the picture. And so that, if I was talking to a small business owner, that would be the number one thing I would look at doing, is completely do a rebrand of our visual assets, whether they're on, anywhere on social and digital media, and try to find, really great content creators out there. Hopefully some of them are, have brand affinity, but even if they don't, there's inherent value in doing that, because a lot of brands, are hiring, maybe they're hiring photographers or they're hiring videographers or what have you. And a lot of this content can be created just by tapping into other influencers. And that's probably the number one suggestion I have to get started for anybody. And I think it also makes it easier, because most companies will have a budget for content. I mean, content unfortunately costs money. Why wouldn't you want to work with someone that's also an influencer when you're going to create? And I think that it may actually come in cheaper. And I do believe the final product may even be better, because instead of hiring an external source, hopefully you're finding someone that's already a user or that's already a fan.
Yeah. So essentially it's like this kind of really amplified version of a testimonial. So instead of just kind of going, can you share our content as a small business influencer? Can you please share our content out via your channel? What you're saying is, can we collaborate with you to create some content that features you? And yes, we'd love it you to share that out to your followers, but we'd also love to use some of that content on our website for a bit of social proof, and within EDMs or, on Facebook or elsewhere, but coming out via our pages or our profiles. So that content's, I guess, being shared by us. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So really what we're looking at is, you're now creating a pool of collaborators that are content creators and have some influence in social and digital media. That's really, and it isn't just a one-time transaction for one campaign. It's really a long-term approach where you tap into various people over a long term based on, objectives. If you have an event coming on, if you have a campaign, if you need content a particular month, that's the type of thing that I'm talking about here. So yes, collaboration. I know like a lot of influencers talk about collabs, and I'm not talking about it. I'm really talking about a true collaboration where, what do they want, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about the celebrity influencers, they do this for a living. Yeah. When we talk about nano influencers, maybe they're students. Yeah. Maybe they work from home. Maybe maybe they don't work, right? Yeah. This is more of like at most a side hustle. Yes. So when you think of it that way, maybe they have other needs. Maybe, it's not just free product they want. Maybe they want exclusive customer service. Maybe they want to do affiliate marketing, which is another type of influence. Maybe, one way of getting people to click is if they were go to the photo, see the product, and then say, hey, my name is Samantha. This is the best thing since sliced bread. Yeah. And by the way, if you enter the discount code Samantha when you check out, you'll get a 50% discount. I'm just making this up. But then people go out of and then it's completely trackable. You don't even have to link in the post because there's that discount code. Yes. So it can be used in a lot of different ways. But I think when we think about content, if we think about influencers, that's a really, really good way to start. When we think about collaboration, if I know with coronavirus, we don't have them now, but if we do virtual events, I know of, companies here that create events for influencers. They create events, for the community, but it gives them an excuse to bring influencers to their events. And this can be done virtually as well to begin that relationship and to start that sort of, collaboration and amplification. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I get that. So, do you think then that influencer marketing is best for businesses and small businesses who are in that B2C space? Or do you see it as having B2B relevance as well?
Yeah, it has as much B2B relevance. And in fact, I was on a podcast interview where the guy's name is Jay Bear. He's actually pretty well known out here in the States. Yeah. So I was on an interview with Jay Bear about B2B influencer marketing. And and he was the one who first, said, Neal, don't you think influencer marketing is more important for B2B than it is a B2C.
Mm.
And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that is the case. And the reason why is with B2C, you normally only have to convince one person who is in charge of the budget. With B2B, you have to convince more people.
Yes.
And with B2C, you know, what hotel should we go to? What restaurant should we go to? What should we buy? There's a lot of customer reviews. You don't find as much digital information about B2B companies. So with limited information, there's probably fewer influencers, fewer amounts of content. And if you're able to somehow influence that content, that's obviously going to speak in your favor as well. And then that trustworthiness.
Yeah.
I mean, B2C, it's important as well, but B2B, it could cost you your job, right? So that is also, and that's something when you work with a recognized authority in the industry that obviously, you know, in itself speaks of who you are, what your company is, how trustworthy you are. So for those reasons, I'm going to go with Jay. He's convinced me as well. And hopefully I convince you as he convinced me.
Yeah. My gosh. No, I never thought of that. Yeah, there's generally a board to convince, or there's a team of people to convince, or you might have the marketing person on board, but they've actually got to go and get the business owner to part with the money, which that's true. No, I really like that approach.
And they're all doing research, right? They're all looking for it, right?
Absolutely. And that trusted referral and those social proof points are so important with business, because sometimes, the stakes are much higher depending on what the purchase is. Particularly for the ambassador within the business who's really kind of pushing to actually go and procure services from another business. You know, if that doesn't work, then their head's potentially on the cutting board. So more Absolutely. To lose. Yeah, I think that's really important. Okay, so now let's talk about followers, because my goodness, Neal, you have an abundance. You have so many followers. Now let's go through them. You've got 220,000 followers on Twitter. Oh my goodness. Over 42,000 followers on LinkedIn, 36,000 followers on Pinterest, as you said before, over 15,000 on Instagram, and close to 40,000 on Facebook. So at my count, and it's probably even more because I added all of those up last week. So it's probably gone up. But it's close to 356,000 followers. So 2 questions. Why have you focused on building your followers on such a broad range of social channels? And how do you leverage the following on that broad range of channels?
Well, thank you for talking about my followers. One thing that people don't know is I only have 300 something subscribers on YouTube. So where I invest time and energy, or where I have invested time and energy over time, followers generally grow.
Right.
And where I haven't, which is YouTube, they don't grow. And I think that's really a case in point. So,
interesting.
I've been active in social media since 2008, and I do social media for a living. So I've written 2 books on LinkedIn. Yeah. And when I wrote my first book, it was in 2009. And after I wrote it, after I finished the rough draft, I'm like, well, I'm ready to move on to what's next. So there are some that just stick to one platform and they niche down, but I felt that would be a disservice to my clients who need expertise in any given social network.
Okay.
So, every social network to me is also sort of an experiment. I need to prove how it works myself, what works, what doesn't work. And obviously when I work with clients, I share that and I learn even more through those experiences. Right. But I'm a content creator, and I wrote, I started a blog in 2008 on LinkedIn when there were very few blogs about it. I would beat LinkedIn.com. So there was somewhere I beat Mashable, and Mashable was very big in the social media space. So it was just a lot less noisier back then. I self-published that book in 2009. There were very few books out on LinkedIn then.
Yeah,
you didn't have all these free Kindle books and what have you. So I was very fortunate timing wise. I started blogging and content creating early on when I could build a big platform, which has really sustained me over time.
Right.
Some social networks, LinkedIn, that's my personal profile. I've also blogged on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Obviously, writing the 2 books has helped. Facebook is a little bit harder to grow organically. I've definitely done some advertising, but once again, these are things I've worked on. They're assets I've worked on for a decade or so.
Wow.
So Twitter, when I work with clients, you have a LinkedIn company page, you have a Facebook page, and then you have a Twitter profile. Twitter organically is the easiest of the three to grow. And I think generally
Right.
speaking, when I look at brands, and Pinterest as well for that matter,
Really?
but what it is it's the content creation of nonstop content creation, content publication, engagement, and when people reach out to you, responding, what have you. So we could
Right.
break down each one of those networks, but I think, if we look at the different things we can do from a digital marketing perspective, you need to have a website, you need to have SEO or pay-per-click, you need to do email marketing, marketing automation, you need to have content, blogging, content marketing, lead magnets. You need to be doing social media. You need to be doing influencer marketing. That would be the number 6. But for the social media piece, organically, the more you do, the less pay to play you need to do. So it comes out to be less expensive. And when you have a platform, it really does give credibility. It also means that, I was looking, when I published my new book, I was looking at the Amazon reviews of people that had reviewed similar books. Yep. So this is a tactic to engage, because they're influencers, right? They write reviews on Amazon. That's amazing. And wouldn't it be great if they'd consider writing a review for my book? So as I go through the reviews, I notice, I'm connected with that person on LinkedIn. Oh, we're following each other on Instagram. When you have a bigger network in your industry, you begin to be able to more easily connect the dots, which I think is the most powerful thing about the relationships. But also it means that anytime I publish something, whenever I do an event, if I send out the email, if I, post it daily on Twitter for a week, if I post it once on LinkedIn, once on Facebook, if I put it on my website, I can almost guarantee I'm going to get a certain number of clicks for that event, for instance. And that's where it gets to be really exciting. And that's really how I leverage it, obviously, is for promotion, not only of, what I do, but when I collaborate with other companies on events or what have you. So, but it's PR, it's nonstop. It's the number one. I almost say I work in order to get more time to be able to spend on my own PR, my own content, because I know that's what drives everything I do. And you got to be creating content. You could be leveraging influencers for content. Don't get me wrong, but if you want to build influence, you need content. You need to pick your content medium. And I was fortunate to be able to do multiple. It's not easy, but I do have a staff that helped me with that as well. I could not have done it by myself. And I also have processes, and I use tools, and I try to use them as savvy as I can.
Yeah, right. So are your clients then other businesses? So are you yourself a business to business brand?
Yes. Okay. I don't sell digital products like a lot of people like myself do. It's all B2B, with the exception of my books. So I've had a plan to sell like a digital membership for a while, but it's still something I haven't done. So I've always thought, learn from the businesses and they pay my salary, and I get to share all that with everybody and sort of build karma. That's always been my, I'm not going to say Robin Hood, but that's always been sort of my approach to all this. And it's worked very well.
And so then what do you sell? Like what do you sell in terms of, so you've got the books, but do you do consulting or like that's, so okay. So you build the influence and then consult.
Yeah. So all of this for me, so if there's other service providers out there, this might be of interest, but all of this started very organically. So I started my career in Japan. I speak Japanese and Chinese. I was doing B2B sales, biz dev marketing, and technology, like semiconductors and embedded software. Wow. Pretty niche industries. Yeah. And I got married out there and came back here to the United States, and we had a baby. And I realized, and I also was in transition for the first time, which is why I started to use LinkedIn, but I needed to reinvent myself because companies were not going to hire an American based in Los Angeles to run their Asia sales or Asia business development, which was my traditional role. So, I had to reinvent myself. And as I began to blog and write my book, I got invited to speak. And it was really in January of 2010. I had 4 different companies reach out to me, all, without knowing what social media was about, but they knew they had to do something. So they were looking to me for leadership, and they were willing to spend money with me. Right. And I didn't have an agency background at the time. My background was B2B. So I didn't think agency, I immediately thought consultancy. Yeah. And I think what businesses needed was, number one, they needed strategy, but they also needed education in order to implement the strategy that we built together. So I started what I called a social media strategy consultancy, or social media marketing strategy. Now that evolved into doing more speaking. I teach at a few universities. I do trainings. And I had one Japanese client, and I work with a lot of Japanese companies because I speak their language, a startup who said, Neal, we love the strategy. We don't have the people to implement it. Can you implement it for us? So I launched an agency as well. But what's happened, Jane, over the last 2 years, and it's really accelerated with the pandemic, is I'm doing something what I would call fractional CMO. Now, I don't think that's the best term for it, but it's basically companies, and I work anywhere from startups to, publicly traded companies, that's the CEO gets it.
Yeah.
And the marketing team doesn't necessarily get it. And maybe they don't have a CMO or VP of marketing. They only have director or manager, but they're not at the level they want to be digitally.
Yes.
So they want to bring me on not as an agency, but they want me to help them with their strategy and work hand in hand with their employees and train them while I help them do the marketing.
Yeah.
So this is something between 1 to 8 hours a week, depending on the client.
Yeah.
And it's a long-term, retainer contract.
Yeah. Right.
And this is something I really, really enjoy doing because I used to do strategies, but I'd have companies say, so how did the strategies go of your past clients? It's like, well, I'm not responsible for implementing them, right? and in the agency world, I realized, I don't know if you've heard of, Marie Kondo.
Yes, yes.
So it's like, do I get joy out of doing this? And I really didn't get joy out of being what I call a slave to the tweet, right?
Yeah.
And I found that I wasn't getting the value for my time. And I do have staff, and if you get enough of those, you can truly scale. But I really wanted, I really enjoy the strategy part and being able to engage with, the executive team and really build something bigger than just be an agency on record. So I've actually not done as much of that and really shifted to this fractional CMO, especially because the speaking is a little bit less with the coronavirus pandemic. That's my dream, to do that, to make enough money just 2 or 3 days a week, which I'm pretty close to doing that. Great. And then I have 2 days a week for my own personal branding, my own speaking, teaching, writing books, what have you.
Right.
So that's where I've pivoted recently. Hopefully that makes sense.
It completely makes sense. And
maybe you have a similar journey.
Oh, it does actually sound quite similar. Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of acting as an agency and doing a do-it-for-you style retainer, but now have pivoted through COVID, have actually pivoted to an academy where I actually work with businesses to help them set the strategy, but actually work with them across 12 months to actually help them implement it, but I don't implement it.
Gotcha.
Bit the same. Consulted Marie Kondo. Do I get joy out of this? How can I show up better, etc.? But I digress.
And I'm in the process of creating that. Because I don't want to be a slave to the tweet.
Yeah.
And I know creating a course. I create books, not courses, right? I could create a course, but it takes a lot of time. So I've been looking at that academy or membership, but I just need to make sure that I have the time to devote to it and that it has value.
It does
that's
take
always
a
sort
lot
of
time.
That's always what's kept me back. But now it's like, okay, well, what if this was a customer and it's 1 hour a week? How much, if I could do that in a membership and charge what I would make from a customer, then the business model makes sense. That's why I've looked to. This has helped me shift in that direction. But
which I think, and COVID's been wonderful for that, because it has kind of really broadened people's imagination in terms of how they can actually show up and scale and show up for their customers and in this new world kind of thing. So bearing that in mind, and I get that you built all of those platforms because you kind of wanted to have some skin in the game and be able to say, okay, if I need to, show you how to really build a following on Pinterest or really make Pinterest work for you or Instagram or whatever, I should really be in that space and doing that and be able to speak from experience. But if you had to now, like say if I said, all right, just choose one social media for the business that you're in now, bearing in mind what you've just said, if you had to choose one of those platforms to really double down on and focus on, which one would you choose?
Well, without doubt, LinkedIn.
Yeah, me too.
If it's B2B. And it's funny, it always has been LinkedIn. I know it goes in and out of, fads. But LinkedIn's always been where the business decision makers are, where the professional networking is. It's funny because out of all those networks, LinkedIn drives the least amount of website traffic. I get, Twitter.
I agree with that.
I get more from Pinterest and Facebook, right? In fact, Pinterest gets more than Facebook and LinkedIn combined, believe it or not.
Are they good quality leads?
Yeah, that's a great question. Twitter actually provides really good quality leads, LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
Pinterest, Facebook, so-so.
Mm.
But I think that the people that you want to engage with are everywhere. They're not just on one network, right? Maybe
Yeah.
one of them is their major network.
Yeah.
But yeah, LinkedIn without it. And I'd say as far as content medium, blog,
Mm.
but these days I've been really infatuated with podcasts. I have my own podcast and I've seen some incredible things sort of come from that because of supply demand. There's just fewer podcasts out there, but great demand.
Yeah.
The attention span that people have when they listen to a podcast, and there's a lot of business users or business leaders who do listen to podcasts regularly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
LinkedIn, blog, podcast would be the three areas that I would absolutely focus on.
Yeah, great. Yep, good. Yeah, I'd agree with you. Again, in a B2B space, I would absolutely agree with you. So if a small business owner is listening to all of this and going, yes, I need to be in this space, I really need to think about influencer marketing and how I can incorporate that. What are some of the planning considerations? So before they go nuts and start reaching out to people all over the place, what do they need to think about first and foremost?
That's a great question. I mean, and Jane, I'm sure you tell them the same thing. They really need to have the strategy in place, right? What are they trying to achieve? And what does that budget look like? And how is that budget divided? How much do you have to work with? Now, my agency or my company is called PDCA Social, and the PDCA Circle is something I learned when I work in Japan, but it's basically Plan, Do, Check, Act, right? And it was made by a professor to manage experiments. So without knowing how you're going to perform, you need to perform experiments. So
Yes.
I don't know what social network is best because every company is going to be different. And
Yes.
I don't know if paid social is going to be effective or not. You don't know until you start.
That's right.
But I'm hoping you start to create some baselines and you have your own funnel. So for social media, if we were to extend the funnel, what I do with my clients, we'd sort of look at, you have followers.
Yeah.
And below the followers, you have profile visits. And this is data you can get on any, analytics on any social platform.
Yeah.
And then from there, we go into the website visits, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, where do you go? It obviously depends on, are you e-commerce or not, what have you. But it's generally sort of, and obviously at some point we have the email marketing automation kicks in and what have you.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the general funnel. So obviously, we want to make sure that in order to get a certain amount of orders or a certain amount of leads, we'd be able to create baseline, and we need to get certain numbers every month when we do the reverse calculation. And then we start to experiment with the networks to find what delivers and what doesn't deliver.
Yes.
And I would include influencers as a part of that. I think where influencers come in, with B2B, they come in with events, right? It's like the startup that I'm working with, and they have a free trial, which is their lead magnet. But when, I convinced them to do a webinar and to reach out to nano influencers in their industry to come join and speak on that webinar, then all at once, they just get an incredible amount of leads, right? And the leads aren't that bad of quality. They depend on the actual, nature of the webinar. But these people are helping to promote the webinar to their community, and therefore they're, it's pure influencer marketing.
Yeah.
For B2C, it might be, like I said, to get the content. It might be strategic affiliations with discount codes, quasi affiliate marketing.
Yes.
That win-win-win for the brand, the influencer, and their community. But really, it's tactically speaking, that influencer piece, understanding that organic social media, you're going to get very, very little engagement. That for organic social media, I would almost consider organic social media to be paid social media. When I work with my clients, we put that as one category.
Yeah.
And then you have those collaborations, the influencers. How can we collaborate to help them drive towards whatever we need in that funnel? So, the first 3 months when I work, I don't know about you, Jane, but when I work with a client, it's all about setting up the funnel,
yes,
looking at what they're already doing, trying to make sense of it. If they're not on a platform they should be on, getting them on there, really trying to get those baseline numbers so that we get some predictability. And then from there,
100%.
working really tactically, whether it's paid social, whether it's content, or whether it's influencers. So, I like to say social media replaces nothing, yet complements everything. And I'd say the same thing. Influencer marketing replaces nothing. It should complement everything else you're doing, because you can get content, they'll help your paid ads, whatever it might be. So that's really the thought process to get started. And once once you have sort of those ideas, okay, we're going to leverage influencers in this way, then you begin to sort of make a list. You begin to do searches on social networks, on Google, on YouTube, on podcasts. And from there, you create a list. And, in all honesty, Jane, I think that influencer outreach is almost like a sale. It brings me back to my Salesforce days, because you're not going to convert everybody. Now, if they're all customers, you have an easier chance of converting them. But you reach out to 100 people. If all 100 are customers, chances are most of them will get back to you. But if a lot of them don't have brand affinity, you're only going to get a percent that comes back to you, which is why you really want to start with, 100, knowing that you may only convert 5 or 10 to collaborate.
And I imagine, like, particularly when you're looking at the nano influencers, like if you're going out, like even if you're avidly following some people in your industry that you think, like they would be great influencers, they seem to have a really engaged following and they really know their stuff, and there's someone I'd like to be aligned with. But those nano influencers might not actually think of themselves as influencer. In fact, the term might repulse them. So it's probably a good idea for small businesses to actually have something in place that actually puts a framework together for them. So say, for example, if someone came to me and said, you've got 3,000 followers on Instagram, I'd really like to do some influencer marketing with you. I've got nothing in place for that. Like for me, I'd go, I don't really have anything. I don't really know. Do you know what I mean? So if the small business said, and this is exactly how we'd like to work with you. We'd like to do this. We'll pay you this. If we'd like you to do this, and then we'll do this. And do you know what I mean? It would make it a lot easier for those nano influencers to say yes, if they could see exactly how they could work together.
Yeah. So in my book, The Age of Influence, I actually have a process and a sample outreach text in there. But before that, there was one sort of step that I was missing, which is to send social signals before you reach out to them. You don't want to do a cold outreach, right?
Okay.
You want to follow, you want to engage, you want to share, you want to comment, you want to build
the relationship,
so that when you do reach out to them, they recognize you. That's and because you can't do that from a Facebook page, you can do that on Twitter. You can do it on Pinterest. You can do it on Instagram. LinkedIn company page, you can do it from a personal profile. So that's why in some networks it's a little bit easier than others. But when you do that and when you reach out, there's two different ways of looking at it. The first one is, we love your work. We know that you're one of our customers. I don't know if they're one of your customers, but we'd love to collaborate with you on a number of things. Are you open for a phone call to talk about it? And if you're able to get a phone call or a Zoom call, as we do these days, you can ask them, have you ever worked with a brand? How do you normally work with brands? So that's one approach, which is really the open-ended. But as you said, Jane, there's something to be said for saying, we have an event coming up, or we want to work with people like yourself to create fantastic content that we'd credit you every time we post it. It would be a win-win. We'll send you product. Excuse me, whatever it is, if you can be direct about it, then obviously that makes it easier for the influencer, but it also makes it easier for them to go, I'm not really interested.
True,
in which case you go back to, so there's no one right or wrong answer. And especially if you want to have sort of this like event to kick things off, or if you're looking for content and that's the number one thing that you'd like to be able to, insource, then it makes sense to approach it in that way.
And so then when we're thinking about outreach and approaching people, what are the characteristics, particularly if say some of these nano influencers or even some of the bigger influencers, if they're not, some of the bigger influencers will have experience, but what are the characteristics that we're looking for in an influencer? What makes a good influencer?
Well, your customers are always the best influencers, right? They'll be able to naturally, in their own words, talk about their product. But there's something to be said for looking, Instagram is the easiest one to talk about because it's visual, right? So if they were to visually represent your product, would it look cool? Or if they're a blogger, if they were to blog about your product, would it make sense? Would it be aligned with everything else they do? So there's sort of this, cultural alignment that I think is really critical, that if, first of all, that cultural alignment, is it part of their branding that they would naturally talk about you and it would fit? And then the relevance in terms of content. The authenticity and then the relevance. I have a profile photo where I wear a suit and a navy blue shirt, right? I'm not, in a t-shirt like I am now, which we're all doing with work from home. But so I'll never forget, just out of the blue, some, custom suit company said, we'll give you a free suit if you talk about us in social media. But
Wow.
I don't talk about fashion in social media.
Yeah.
I have no influence in the subject. If it's like this new savvy social media dashboard, I might have influence. But so that relevance is really key. This is where a lot of companies make a mistake. I think it's in Australia, a female bodybuilder that a bikini company did some collaboration with, and it was a complete failure because they didn't realize that 95% of this female bodybuilder's audience were males. So, so there's a bit of an alignment that you need to make there, and there's no one. You might make mistakes along the way, but I would hope that an influencer would also say, that your content is not really relevant to my audience, right? If they're really at
my
that
male followers
level.
don't tend to wear bikinis. Thanks, but no thanks. But it also, and for small businesses out there as well, you can actually, particularly on Instagram, there's complete transparency around who follows the page. You can actually look to see who is following that person and get a gauge as to whether they are the right kind of customer for your product to get in front of. So it does pay to do a bit of research.
There are tools. There are things like just go through. There are like data scraping services where you can download lists of followers, right?
Yeah.
Just do a search. And then maybe for every 100th follower, you look at the profile. It's not extremely scientific, but it is one way to say, okay, are they even located in Australia? Are they in Queensland? Are they in Victoria, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people put their location. But and there are also ways in which you might say, can you please send me a screenshot of your analytics so I can see where people are located? Now, not every influencer is going to want to do that. Some might be offended by that. Yeah. But I think it's really, hey, we serve out the way that I would approach it is we sell throughout Australia. And depending on where your followers are from, we'd really like to customize the content or customize our collaboration for that region. So it's going to be a win-win.
But isn't that what they're selling? Like, I was going to ask you how curious you can get with these influencers in terms of just checking their credentials, so to speak. Like, isn't that essentially what they're selling? If you're buying their influencer, you're kind of buying the proof that they actually do have engagement and affinity, and as you said, that their followers are in the country that you're actually trying to sell the product, etc. Do they generally sometimes not want to give that information? I would have thought they'd have like a little pack ready to go with it all there for you.
The media pack, it is the Wild West because these are individual people. So this is where what the traditional influencer marketing industry has done well is they've required influencers to use, OAuth or to authorize their social networks. And then you can actually go through and search for who has a lot of followers in certain locations, what have you. Now, Instagram has also been closing off their API with every year. So that data may not even be available anymore. But obviously at an individual level, it is available in their insights. Some people think it's an invasion of their privacy, a slap in the face. I'd say, look, we really want to strategically work with you, but this is information we're asking of all influencers, and we'd like to ask you. We're not, we can put an NDA in place, but obviously you're very influential, and we just need to better understand your influence so that we can customize how we work together.
So then how if, so say, for example, our small businesses have put their plan together, they've worked out their funnel, they've chosen who they want to use as an influencer, they've got their little bunch of influencers ready to go. How are they going to actually measure the return? So they've put their budget aside. And look, I would like to think that in the strategic planning process, they'd actually put, this is where we want the influencers to actually plug into the business. We want them to help spread awareness or whatever. But how do you find that most people measure the return of whether an influencer marketing campaign has been successful or not?
So I think obviously it comes down to the objective, because if it's content creation, then let's compare it with how much we spend on content creation, right? In fact, you could put together an Excel spreadsheet and go, okay, paid ads, for these paid ads, we got how many clicks, how many impressions, how many engagements. How did we do with the budget we used with influencers? How did that perform?
Yeah.
So, but what I think we're trying to do, Jane, is that realizing that organic social media is pay to play, it is like paid ads. How are we going to measure the ROI? Well, it's very, very easy to measure, but we're still going to continue to do them to some extent. And I think that influencer marketing becomes that way as well. And what happens over time, Jane, is that you work with a pool of influencers and you track how each one of them do. And over time, like anything else in marketing, it's the 80-20 rule. 20% of the influencers will probably generate 80% of the results. So you begin to work more and more with those that tend to perform better.
Yes.
And you always bring in new influencers into the stable, so to speak. So it's its own PDCA data experiment. And that's how you continually optimize over time. But I do believe compare it to paid social is really the easiest way. Compare it to your Google pay-per-click, or how much do you put into SEO? I mean, this is all sort of measurable, but how do you measure when you went from a number 10 to a number 7 ranking?
Yes.
Is it the value of each website visitor? Okay, well then how many website visits did content generated from influencers develop for us? It's really the same idea. There's no one tool that will do all this for you. But I do believe if you work in a very defined way, you can go in and measure how that performance was.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree. Neal, tell us about this latest book of yours, The Age of Influence. What can people expect to find within the pages?
Well, I actually always have a copy handy. So
perfect.
But I have always, this is my 4th book, and I've always written books to serve my community. Yes. And I realized maybe 2 to 3 years ago, there were just a lot of questions after I spoke about not just influencer marketing, but how can I become an influencer? Maybe it's because it's LA and there's just a lot of influencers around here, as you can imagine, with Hollywood and fashion and what have you.
Yes.
But as I did more research, I realized that there really is a need when, people just put influencer marketing in this very, very narrow silo, when the concept of digital influence is a lot broader. So I wrote the book, and the book is sort of split into 3 different parts. The first part is really looking at the trends as to why influencer marketing is so important. So, I talk about influencer marketing being the extension of the celebrity endorsement. I go back a little history back into the 19th century and influencer marketing back in the 18th century before we had the internet and social media. But also just a few other things, a few other challenges that businesses have had over the past few years that influencer marketing, answers. The second part is literally called Understanding Influencers and the Ways You Can Engage with Them. So we talked a lot about this. Who are influencers then? And how can we engage with them to get people and businesses to think? And the last part is how to work with influencers to generate massive results. And this is where, do you buy or build? How to create the strategy, how to identify, how to create and manage relationships, different tools, how to measure the ROI, a lot of things that we covered. And the fourth part, I believe that the more influential your business is in social and digital media, the easier it's going to be for you to work with other influencers. So say you started a podcast and you become a top 100 podcast in Australia. Guess what? Everybody's going to want to be on your podcast.
Yes.
If you have 10,000 followers and you're reaching out to nano influencers with 1,000 or 2,000 followers, guess what? They'll probably want to, they're going to be delighted, right? Or if you have a blog with a domain authority of 78 and you're reaching out to bloggers that are in the 20s and 30s, they would love to get a link from your website back to theirs. So that concept, I think is really, really critical. And the fourth part sort of goes over that, talks about how you can reverse engineer the process and how you yourself can become more influential.
And I think that was one of the questions that I was going to ask you too, was how, like you say, because I get it, like in terms of actually becoming an influencer in yourself, like what is that covered in the book in terms of, okay, if people decide that they want to create some influence with their business, is that covered as to how you would do that? Or is there a rough 3-step process?
I have one chapter devoted to it. This is not a book on how to become an influencer. I'm very upfront with that at the beginning of the book, but it's a natural that marketers look at that and go, okay. And I think, you reverse engineer the process. So it comes down to content, it comes down to niche or subject matter. And, pick a platform, pick a content medium, consistency, engage with other people to help build that community, show up, engage with others. And it's something that just happens over time. But I think within influencer ecosystems, engaging and sort of collaborating with other influencers is something that's very natural. that a lot of influencers do. And that's sort of an extra step that I would add.
Yeah.
It's like being on Jay Baer's podcast, and Jay Baer's like, Neal, I'd love to be on your podcast as well. It's like, okay, done. Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that goes on in any given industry. And I think once you're in sort of that group of people, it just, a lot of things happen naturally from an influencer perspective.
Nice. Okay. So where am I going to direct our listeners to, Neal? So if they want to connect with you and have the benefit of all of that fabulous content that you're putting out there, obviously they can go and purchase The Age of Influence on your website, or probably on all of the major online books shops, Amazon, etc. But which of your many channels would you like them to connect to you with, or should they connect with you on all of them?
Well, I am Neal Schaffer everywhere on social media. That's the real Neal. So it's Neal.
The real Neal.
And there's a bunch of Schaffers out there in digital media. So it's Schaffer. Okay. And I also have nealschaffer.com. And I also have my own podcast called Maximize Your Social Influence, where I talk about this, innovative marketing through leveraging this perspective of digital influence. So, and then the book was published by HarperCollins Leadership. So it's available in Australia. It's available wherever you buy fine books throughout the world.
Fantastic. Well, I know I've downloaded myself a copy, and I can't wait to listen. And I'm also going to go and subscribe to your podcast, because I have so enjoyed this conversation. You have just honestly given me so many ideas in terms of, even for my business, but also for my clients, as to how we might be able to tap into the power of influencer marketing. So I really appreciate it. And for all of you listeners, please know that Neal's actually joining us on his Sunday afternoon. So he's actually gone above and beyond to bring you this insight. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, Neal.
Thank you, Jane. It's been fun.
Well, I don't know about you, but I now have a completely different perspective to influencer marketing after speaking with Neal. As small businesses, we definitely have potential influencers sitting right under our noses. I really loved the idea of using nano influencers. It really makes the whole influencer marketing tactic a whole lot more achievable for small business. Now, if you are enjoying all of the small business marketing insight that is being shared out on the How to Do Marketing show, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave a rating and review. I really value these, guys, and it certainly helps other people to find and discover the How to Do Marketing show. So it would be awesome if, after finishing this and you're not driving in the car, if you could head to the How to Do Marketing show and give it a rating and review, or subscribe. Also, we'd love you to join in the discussions about small business marketing in the How to Do Marketing group on Facebook. I'm in the group all the time, answering people's questions and publishing snackable marketing tips. So please join us. Just go to Facebook and search for the How to Do Marketing group. And if you'd like to sign up to receive regular small business marketing tips delivered straight to your inbox, head on over to dragonflymarketing.com.au. Until next time, guys, happy marketing.
You've been listening to another Morgan Media production.